are live. Welcome to everyone who's tuned in so far. I'm Boris from Line, and it is my pleasure today to be hosting Tom Lehman, the founder of Facet, which is the first general purpose stage 2 rollup, something that was announced recently and is really, really exciting. Tom, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Hello, great to be here. Thanks to you. Thanks to everyone tuning in. Love it.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot of interesting stuff to discuss today. Obviously, Facet, the Unstoppable Rollups initiative, the whole idea of unstoppable rollups in general, Ethereum in general. I thought it would be good to start off with a little bit of just like an introduction about you and your background, because I think you have a very interesting background, and I'd love to know how you got into Ethereum. And I think it's cool that you are a founder in crypto who previously had a product that I think probably more people in crypto have used than they're aware of. So I think that's kind of interesting, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. So I spent most of my career life really in Web 2, new to Web 3. I spent about 12 years as the CEO and co-founder of a website called Genius. So it's genius.com. You might notice Rap Genius. We changed our name, but the original concept was annotating, explaining the meaning behind rap lyrics. It then became more about explaining the meaning behind all lyrics, all music, hearing from artists what they are trying to say with their lyrics, and basically, the #1 lyrics website and the #1 music appreciation website. And this was something I was, so deep into I couldn't even see, what was going on with Ethereum and Bitcoin a little bit, but Ethereum was too complicated at the time. I was so engrossed in this, I didn't care about crypto. I didn't care about decentralization. But there is something which is often said, which is decentralization doesn't matter, until it does, basically. And so fortunately for me, or unfortunately, I had a till it does moment, which I'll describe now. So basically, Genius is a lyrics website first. People go to find the lyrics. The way people find lyrics is by Googling them. Basically, Google is should rename themselves lyrics search box. A lot of searches are for lyrics on Google. And we would always show up first. And that's why we get a ton of traffic. And the way we would show up first is that we would have the correct lyrics really fast before anyone else did, right when the song came out. And this is a misconception about lyrics. People think, oh, you're running a lyrics website. Great. You go to the lyrics database and you get the lyrics from the database, you put on your website. Not true. There is no lyrics database. There is no hard and fast concept of lyrics. The only way to know the lyrics are to transcribe them, to listen to the song. So if you can do that, you'll have the best content. Anyway, we achieved great success doing this. But then after some time, Google, who owns google.com, had the idea that they want to compete in the lyric space. They want to use their monopoly in search to get a monopoly in something else, basically. This is not allowed, but they did it. And the way they did it was they created a lyrics search box, or rather a lyrics info box that went above all search results and contained their lyrics and linked to their ad-supported platforms like YouTube. And this was pretty bad because they would always be first. But what made it even worse was they were taking the lyrics from genius.com, because we're the only ones who had them, and putting it above us in the search results, right? So it's like they take the thing from down here and it's ours, and then they put it up here, and it is competing with us with the work we created. And so this was obviously manifestly unfair. And we thought, well, it's really impossible to prove this, because how do you actually prove it? We know it. But then we hatched this giant plan to prove it, where we basically inserted watermarks in lyrics. The most famous one, you can read about this in the Wall Street Journal. The most famous one was alternating straight apostrophes with curly apostrophes, how these apostrophes go. And once you decoded that pattern, interpreting it as Morse code, it spelled red-handed, basically. So it proved there's no way these apostrophes got this way without copying. So we thought, okay, we've nailed them, hundreds of songs, boom, we're going to get money, or at least get them to stop doing it. And they said no. We sued them. They got great lawyers. We lost. We took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court almost took the case, maybe, but then they asked the Biden administration, should we take it? The Biden administration said no. It was a whole thing. And so after this happened, I was kind of like, wow, I have aged 20 years. I thought the world was, I didn't think the world was fair, but I thought it was more fair than that. If you catch someone red-handed doing a manifestly unfair thing, you should be able to get them to at least stop. And then what I realized is look, Google can't be beaten. They're too entrenched. They control so much. they control, they don't control the whole internet, but they control the front door. They control where you, it's like if you're in the fishbowl, they control the water, right? You can't go to the other store in the fishbowl because the water is everywhere. And they also have enough power to basically control the government when it comes to these important questions. So we need a new fishbowl, a new playing field where we can actually be on a level playing field with these giant corporations and these powerful people. And, to me, that's Ethereum. So that's what kind of got me motivated. If that had not happened to me, I wouldn't be here, right? If you're a normal person and Google's never tried to mess with you, like maybe you just want to forget about the whole crypto thing. It's really stressful. But if Google has messed with you, you probably are going to have some party that wants to spend a lot of your life trying to stop that from happening again to you and to other people. So that's what I see Ethereum as, is the last real hope for that. And Ethereum's got a ton of problems. Might not work, in fact, but where's the better idea? Just hand over the keys to everything. Hey, corporations, here are the keys to everything. Like, that's the other option. So I don't want to do that. And that's why I'm in crypto.
That is an awesome story. that's wicked. It's got everything: antitrust. It's got Google throwing its weight around. And that's maybe one of the first times I've heard this specific angle on, like, getting into crypto. A lot of people talk about maybe being debanked or unbanked or high fees or something, but this is like a really, thank you for sharing that. So when did you actually start working on Ethereum? Like, how did you, like, I guess you have a software background. You're no stranger to technology, but like, how did you start building on Ethereum or working on it or exploring it more deeply when you realized what it was all about?
So basically in 2021, the end of 2021, we sold Genius. And, it's a big step, like my whole life, 12 years of my life. And now what now? Like, who am I? And so I decided to, okay, what's going on? So one thing I kind of knew was like technology. Like, I was the original programmer for genius.com, and it's a cool website. It's got like a crowdsourced element, and it's like Wikipedia meets Stack Overflow, Urban Dictionary. Right? So it's a cool website. It was great to program. And then later on, I couldn't really do that. I had to worry about, managing the company and making money. So I want to do something interesting with technology. And also, this is 2021, crypto's going up. And so I started, basically, gambling, buying, bought some Luna, buying some just like, garbage that my friends recommended, and kind of having some fun with it. But after a while, it's kind of like, wait, what is going on here with Ethereum? Like, what's the actual deal? Is this just like random like stuff? Like, I didn't no idea. So I investigated. I was like, whoa, you can write your own token, and not just your own token. You can write your own anything on this. Like, this is a cloud computing platform. And the best part is you program it in JavaScript, basically, which you can pick up like really fast. And so once I saw that, I was like totally addicted. My initial interest was NFTs, basically. I think NFTs just combine the ultimate. It's just really everything for me. It's like cool art stuff plus tech plus like weird thing. Like, I would love in the early days saying, crypto, NFTs, what's an NFT? Well, here's just an example, and show the CryptoPunk alien and say, this picture is worth $30 million. And then the person's like, what? Get out of here with that. And it's still worth a lot. But I became obsessed with like this on-chain NFTs thing. The idea that, it's all the same stuff since the beginning. The ability to do stuff in a way that can't be stopped or censored or whatever. So on-chain NFTs, my first project was a website. It was called ForeverMessage, ForeverMSG.com, which is basically a way of creating an NFT that was like a note that you wrote. So like a note that would last forever, which has kind of been this through line. Other NFTs, I worked with amazing artist Piv on a project called Capsule21.com, which you can go to and see a bunch of cool CryptoPunk derivatives and other on-chain NFTs we did. So I was obsessed with this. And this is actually how I met my co-founder in Facet. Facet's a two-person team. My co-founder, Michael Hirsch, who started a company called Indelible Labs, with an on-chain NFT builder product. And we were just really interested in like the minutia of like how to get the PNGs to render and how to do the rarity calculations and everything. So we were just like, geeking out on it. And so we met. And then over time, I kind of got just like very frustrated with Ethereum. It's just so expensive. And now it's really cheap, which is weird. And I don't even know what's going on. At the time, and this is even after 2021, at the time it was so expensive. And it's just like, if you want to do something cool, if you just want to make an NFT, like so much work. And so, that's when Michael and I had this idea of Inscriptions, basically, which is, if you know about inscriptions on Bitcoin, this was the kind of meme joke counterpart to it on Ethereum. The idea was basically, let's be a little funny here. Let's do an inscriptions product on a platform that has smart contracts, because why do you need inscriptions if you can just do NFTs? But then as we started creating it and getting, energy around it, we were like, okay, this is actually kind of a pretty big idea, because it is cheaper than smart contracts, but just as decentralized and unstoppable, because there is no, and this is when rollups were first kind of getting going. There's no centralized operator, no all kinds of stuff. So that was the idea. And then, sorry,
Tom, I want to pause you there for 1 second. I dropped links to ForeverMessage and Capsule 21 in the chat for anyone who's watching and wants to see it. I'll add it to the show notes later as well. Could you explain, inscriptions for people who aren't aware of this, and ETHscriptions? Like, I have a rough idea of what this is, but just quickly, could you introduce this idea? Like, it's writing to call data in a smart contract, but not actually writing a smart contract, right?
Right. So, I think if you were to put it in terms of, contemporary, like roll-up theory, argot, I guess you would say, like, inscriptions were a based sovereign app chain, non-EVM. So that's one way you could put it, if that's gobbledygook or whatever. But the idea is basically very similar to the roll-up concept, which is, depending on how you look at roll-ups, and there's a whole thing about that because there's no bridge on this thing. But anyway, the idea was by creating a stream of data that is Ethereum transactions with call data, by creating that, posting Ethereum transactions that have call data of a certain kind, a data URI in them. You post that goes on Ethereum, and then an indexer or a node, you could call it, interprets that call data in a way that is according to its own rules, its own fantasy land, basically its own protocol. And so if you just post random call data, then Ethereum and, Alchemy's RPC or whatever, all the, it's junk, right? No one looks at it. But Inscriptions was a protocol that gave it meaning. Mm-hmm. And, people are always like, what is this? Like, it's, is this real? Like, how, it's not part of Ethereum. And it's like, it's like driving on the right side of the street. It's like a protocol where, if you follow it, you can have this kind of fun. You don't have to follow it. And it turns out that rollups basically are the same thing. So this was a non-general purpose. This was a special purpose NFT and token asset rollup. And because of that, we were able to restrict what you could do. And because of that, if you can't do arbitrary things, we didn't need a gas token. And so it was a lot simpler. And we didn't think of it exactly like this, but it was basically that. So you post a data URI, like a ping image, and according to protocol rules, the person you send the Ethereum transaction to owns it. You're the creator, and then you can transfer it according to other rules as well.
Okay. Cool. So instead of like a token contract for the NFT, it's just call data in a transaction you send to somebody, but it relies on this like off-chain indexer or node to actually make sense of what this data is.
Correct. And this is how rollups, same story with rollups. You post junk, like forget blobs, because like, let's go back to the call data era and just make it simpler. You post junk in call data to Ethereum, and no one knows what that means. But then you have a rollup node that's specifically set up to interpret that, and by its rules can create a whole universe. And in that universe can have things like smart contracts. But those smart contracts are like part of this fantasy world that's not connected to, there's proofs, but not connected to Ethereum smart contracts. In the world of inscriptions, there was no smart contracts. It's just who owned what. But it was the same idea. You look at the junk using a node or indexer, and you interpret it according to a protocol. And if enough people like the fantasy land of the protocol, want to use that roll up, then you can have fun with it.
That is super cool. It also, this reminds me of something I saw recently, which is, I forget what they're called, ECF maybe, but they have this Blobkit SDK, and the whole idea is just write arbitrary data to blobs, and it made me think of this. I don't know if that's something you've checked out at all, if you have thoughts on that, but
yeah, it's funny. When blobs first, came out, of course, we had to do Blobscriptions. So that was a sort of sidecar type thing to Inscriptions, where the Inscriptions protocol wasn't, blobs didn't have generic utility there. Like the protocol was not dependent on blobs, but you could add an attachment, basically a separate piece of media. So you could have the inscription be like some kind of description of the picture, and you attach the attachment picture. And so we had to come up with like a standard for doing that. And so I would, everyone loves first. I think we were there first, but whatever, Blobscriptions Didn't become that huge, although it might still. But yeah, I think it's a I think, yeah, you gotta, whatever it is, you need the inscriptions. Vitalik even tweeted about Blobscriptions. He was like, all right, we got the price discovery, these annoying, not saying this, but like these annoying people are doing the thing again. They always do. You gotta do that. If there's a new wall, you have to write on that wall, because when it's Ethereum and blobs are temporary, blah, 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 but it's still, the wall of history here. So it's a lot of fun to play with that.
Yeah, totally. No, that's super interesting. So this experiment, this work you're doing with Inscriptions, this protocol, it seems like there's a kind of like through line towards Facet, which I'd love to hear about. And also maybe this is a good time to introduce Facet, what Facet is, and then of course where the idea came from and why you're building it, because it's something that I've been learning about recently, and I think it's very, very cool and very in line with a lot of the things that you said about Ethereum and why you work on it, and also I think why a lot of people work on Ethereum in general. So
sure. Yes. So Inscriptions, Inscription kind of naturally led to this Facet notion, because we kept running into challenges with extending, Inscriptions. It's like, what about a, domain name protocol and Inscriptions, like all these sub protocols, and you think, okay, we're going to program all of this into the indexer, and then by the time you have that, you have an indexer which is really like 25 apps in it. So a special use protocol is just hard, because then at the protocol level, you have to design everything people want to do with it. So, Ethereum was smart about this, and Ethereum didn't launch and say, hey, here's our token thing and our NFT thing. Ethereum launched and say, here's a general purpose VM, and go nuts and create applications. And that's, we don't have to worry about it. And so the VM can be, it's still super complicated, be pretty simple, right? It can be agnostic to all this stuff. And that's what we kind of wanted to do, versus making Inscription super duper complicated. And if I were to do it all over again with my knowledge now, there's maybe we can get to that, some things I would, do differently. But at the time, it was really that question of like, make Inscriptions really complicated and build an indexer. And plus the indexer is like Postgres backed. And so like, there's all kinds of challenges with making like reorg stuff work. And anyway, whatever, there are these limitations. So we thought, okay, we want to take this idea, unstoppability, no admin control, everyone's on the same footing, totally decentralized, whatever, that means in this context, but like take that idea and make it general, allow anyone to do anything with it, not just the subset of things the Inscriptions let you do. And so this was the idea for Facet. The original version of Facet, which took an insane amount of time and was, in retrospect, maybe not the best idea. The original version of Facet was actually cool. It was a Inscriptions-based VM that would allow you to create transactions using Inscriptions, and then it would interpret those as part of a custom VM that was not EVM, but kind of close to it. And you would write smart contracts in a dialect of Ruby called Rapidity. And it was super cool and complicated, but ultimately not good, because, you're not going to be able to EVM 1. So we had this Facet thing. And then we went and we launched Facet v2, which was the EVM version. And so with that, we had to solve a bunch of problems that we never did with Inscriptions, notably the gas issue. And now we have the Facet rollup, and of course proofs. And now we have the Facet rollup, and the Facet rollup is, the only general purpose stage 2 rollup on Ethereum. General purpose meaning you can deploy arbitrary smart contracts. It's the only unstoppable, general purpose unstoppable rollup on Ethereum, meaning you can deploy arbitrary contracts and no one can stop it. And, it's also the rollup protocol that, for better or for worse, right, gives you the most L1-esque experience, right? The L1, there's no bosses, right? There's no admins, there's nothing. And maybe you want a rollup that works like that. Now, you maybe don't want a rollup that works like that. Like, not everyone in the world has to use Facet, of course. But if you are interested in that, Facet's kind of the only game in town right now. It's kind of the culmination of all this work. Starting with Inscriptions years ago with, obsession with unstoppability, basically.
Yeah, Tom, that's awesome. I know this is recent news. I have I can't even share my screen, I don't need to share my screen, but I guess this was, I don't have the date here, but when Facet became the first general purpose rollup, general purpose stage 2 Ethereum rollup, according to L2Beats staging framework. This was about a month ago, I guess, beginning of August. That is a huge accomplishment, and it's something that, the community has been talking about for a long time, because of course there are issues with the current state of rollups and concerns about censorship resistance and security. But I'm actually, I think a good way to maybe like start here would be hearing your definition of a rollup. I think there's a lot of different definitions for rollups, so I'm curious to hear yours specifically.
So it's a great question. In these sorts of things, it's like, well, this is actually pretty important because this is like your whole life. At the same time, you get so deep into this, you're like, wow, how am I going to ever, make an impact outside? It's like, who can I talk to this about? It's a narrow thing, but it's actually super important. So there's basically two views of what a rollup is, and I support both. I'm not trying to, I support one more than the other, but I think they're both valid. So there are two views. So one view, and this is the sort of inscription thing we were just talking about, which is a rollup is a function. Okay, a function is something that has inputs and outputs and deterministically computes, the outputs from the inputs, and you can't have, one goes inputs to outputs, right? A rollup is a function, an abstract idea, and the inputs are the entire history of everything that's ever happened on the L1, and the outputs are a blockchain, basically. And so it is a way of constructing a blockchain, which can be embodied in software or just ideas. Like you could do it by hand if you had a million years to do it. It's a way of constructing a blockchain from only L1 history. And so the beauty of that approach, right, is that L1 history is secure. You don't have to worry about, there's reorgs, but you don't have to worry about someone forging, it's like pretty secure. So that means your blockchain state will be well-defined and secure. And so a rollup is a function. This is known as the bridge is not the rollup viewpoint. There's another viewpoint, which is the bridge is the rollup. And the bridge is the rollup basically jumps off from this idea that who cares, right? If you do not have the ability to pass messages back and forth, if you don't have the ability to send a message from a rollup to Ethereum, for example, withdrawal, but it could be any message, then you're not really going to be worth very much here. People want bidirectional message passing, and that's the deal. So another way to look at it is the bridge. And so the bridge is really a stand-in for, it is a thing, a smart contract on the L1 that has what's called a state root in it somewhere. And that state root, you might as well think of as like the summary of the entire state of the blockchain. So without loss of generality, you could just say the whole blockchain is stored in the smart contract here, basically, even though that's not what happened. So there has to be an L1 smart contract that basically knows the state. And so if you don't have that, then you don't have a rollup, and the rollup is defined by what is in that storage slot on that smart contract. And so if you don't have the ability to put that state root in there in a secure way, of course, you don't actually have a rollup. And so I think, both of these, definitions are valid. Before Facet had a proof system, I was very partial to the one that didn't require a proof system. Now that we have one, and it was a lot of work, I'm pulling up the ladder and saying, you absolutely need a proof system. But yeah, I think you need both. Basically, you need a node, you need a thing that will compute the rollup state, and then you need a proof system that will send it down to the L1 in a secure way. But the core idea of the rollup is the state is determined by the L1 history, and so that's the super powerful unlock, right? You don't have to worry about your state being secure because it's just from L1 history. So then the question becomes, what L1 history is relevant, right? Then we get into the question of sequencing and transaction inclusion. But the core idea is a super strong one, and I'm totally rollup pilled. I think they are it's like a better way of doing blockchain stuff as long as you have a secure base layer. So that's how I would think about a rollup.
I like that a lot. That thank you. Yeah, like one definition of blockchains in general that really stuck with me was that a blockchain is just a machine that has the job of maintaining a state transition function. It's a machine that just takes state from point 1 to point n by very specific rules, and then there's a lot more that goes into ensuring that the state transition function is maintained. But then rollups basically extend this, saying we have this blockchain and it's just a set of rules for another blockchain secured by that first one. So yeah, kind of nice. And I was wondering, there's all the over the past years, there's been a lot of talk about modular blockchains and the different parts of blockchains, monolithic versus modular. So I was wondering if you were going to get into settlement, DA, sequencing, execution, any of that, but you kind of sidestep all of that. Like those are all parts that can fit into your definition, but you kept it even simpler, which I like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really believe like settlement, like DA. Like first of all, DA sounds so like bad. It's like DA, data availability. You make it available. It's like DA is like the truth determining thing or whatever. DA is a big thing. So like, you know, saying DA, I don't like saying DA, even though it's like terminology. You know, the blockchain can do the base layer of Ethereum, the roll-up centric idea does two things. One, it puts things into order, and two, it verifies proofs. And so that's the big picture here. It's just how roll-ups, you know, interact with that settlement. It's like, you know, there's a outdated, I think, model that just says, hey, a roll-up has a bridge, right? But it's like, hey, a roll-up can have a million bridges. The question is like, is the proof system secure for these things? A roll-up can settle to other things that have the ability to verify proofs. Like, I don't think it's that meaningful. To me, it's about how you get the roll-up state and how you can verify its, you know, prove it back to the L1.
And I guess who is able to do those things to verify its state and to prove it, which is where stage 2 comes in and becomes very important if you want something unstoppable. So a lot of different directions I can take this into. I mean, I do want to keep asking you about Facet, right? So it's as a stage 2 rollup, basically means that users cannot be rugged. You know, if you have,
you know, I would just say, look, like I love Facet. It's my life, you know, but I don't want to, and I'm proud of it. And, you know, we're the best at some things where, you know, we're great, but I don't want to give people the impression that what we are doing is building a generically better blockchain infrastructure. And the reason for that is that the utility and goodness of a blockchain is always and should always depend on the apps and the user app relationship. So you can get rugged on Facet, just like you can get rugged on the L1. But if you get rugged, it will be because an app rugged you, not because the protocol rugged you. Now, if you tell someone, great news, you got rugged, but not by the protocol, maybe they're like, I don't care, I got rugged. But like, still, this is an important question. It's about, you know, kind of getting the protocol admin or the protocol itself out of the way between the user app relationship and letting the user and apps do what they want to do. And hopefully the users research the apps they choose, but they have that choice. You know, it is about freedom maximization, in which people still have to do their own research. It's not necessarily about best outcome maximization, because when you get maximal freedom, you know, people are free to, you know, make bad, you know, do whatever they want to do. But that's kind of, for me, the attraction of Ethereum, the L1, is you get this freedom maximization perspective. You don't get prescriptions about here's the stablecoin you need to use, or here, use this thing. And I think it's cool to have a roll up that does the same. So you can't get rugged by the protocol, but you could get rugged if you don't, you know, use the right app and the app's malicious or something, just like on the L1.
Yeah, good clarification. It's like you can do anything as long as it follows the rules of the protocol, which means, yeah, people can still do some bad things. So just to help people understand, like, could you give an entry level overview of like Facet's architecture and maybe how it might differ from a rollup people are more familiar with? Maybe people aren't super familiar with rollups. It's just people like us who are spending a lot of time thinking and talking about them. But like, what are the general parts, you know, to the rollup? There must be a node that's actually sequencing, you know, putting transactions in order, moving the state forward for the rollup. But what else is there?
Right. So yeah, so there's a node, and the node derives the rollup state, and then later can figure out how to prove it. Derives the rollup state from the history of the L1, and as we were just saying, like, what is the relevant history, right? Who is allowed to create the history entries that will be relevant to the rollup? And by history entries, really we just mean user transactions. So you post a blob or a bunch of user transactions to the L1. The rollup node looks at those transactions and executes it in their own VM environment, and then out pops the state. So who can create transactions? So you know, obviously on Ethereum, there's this whole huge thing called proof of stake, right? And this has all these rules, and there are all these kinds of problems with it, but it has that, right? We get the blocks, and they have an order within the blocks. And the question is, on top of that, what does the rollup do in terms of shenanigans or whatever, or good things to, you know, get the ordering? And so typically rollups use a thing called having a centralized sequencer. That's kind of a negative sounding thing because it's not necessarily always bad, even close to always bad, but it can be bad. So a centralized sequencer is this idea that one person can post user transactions, can create relevant history, and therefore control the future of the rollups state. So if you go and use Base, I always pick on Base. I like Base, but just they're the biggest OP stack and Rollup, and I'm familiar with that. But like you give your transaction to the Base sequencer, and right, everyone probably knows this if you're listening to this, and the Base sequencer holds on to it, gives you a confirmation, lets you live in this fantasy land of what the Base sequencer thinks is going to happen, and then the Base sequencer packages up and sends it to the L1, and then it's actually final. So there's one person that can do that. And this leads to a bunch of problems, basically, because what if that thing breaks, right? And so again, sorry to pick on Base, but Base went down not that long ago, right? Like a couple weeks ago, a month ago, something pretty recent. Base went down for a couple hours. And Base, of course, scrambled to fix it. Coinbase, billions and billions of dollars, right? Base makes them millions of dollars. They're going to scramble to fix it. They finally fixed it. But if you are an observer of that, what you might wonder is, what if they hadn't fixed it? Or more severely, what if they were trying to break it, right? Like imagine this billion-dollar company is trying to break a computer. Could they break a computer? I think they could. And so what would happen in that case? And this is where you get to the stoppability. So when you break the sequencer, you have to fall back on a different mechanism called forced inclusion. And Optimism, OPStack actually has a pretty good thing here, where you can go to a smart contract, you can submit a transaction, and that transaction will get included on the rollup without the sequencer's permission. And it'll take a day to do it and blah, blah, blah. But it is pretty good. Now, the problem is forced inclusion in practice has a tiny gas target, right? Like the Optimism forced inclusion mechanism, which is very cool, and I like it, but the parameters are not good, right? Like if you do forced inclusion on Optimism, you're going to end up with a gas target that's 2 million L2 gas units per L1 block. So whatever that means, but it's like 99.9 or 95. It's almost nothing compared to the normal operations of Base. And so you have to ask yourself, in practice, if the Base sequencer ended and everyone on Base had to get their money out with forced inclusion, what would actually happen? And this is the point at which you expect Coinbase to step up and say, here's what would happen, and it's fine, right? Here's our research on this. We have this multi-billion-dollar huge thing, and so here's our research saying that it works, right? There's no research, right? It's not my problem, right? It's their problem. Come up with a justification for why it's fine. Okay, but suppose it is fine. Now we get another vector, which is the killer vector of this, which is upgradability. So these protocols depend on smart contracts on the layer 1. So for example, you submit your forced inclusion to a smart contract. That smart contract emits an event. There's a rollup node that is programmed to do what that smart contract says. And so if everyone's running the same software, get the same behavior. But the smart contracts are upgradable. So now Coinbase or someone hacks them. I'm not going to say Coinbase does something actually bad, but like someone hacks them and they upgrade this forced inclusion contract and they say it's disabled, right? You can't use it. And now it's over. No transactions. Done, right? And this actually happened on Blast. They censored forced inclusion on there. So that was the first canary in the coal mine thing. Could easily happen. And so it's done. And so what happens? Like, what happens now? Like, maybe, you could coordinate and fork Base, but then what about the bridge and getting people on the same? It's just, it would be really, really, really not good if this happened. There's a major vulnerability, all the stuff I mentioned. So Facet here adopts a different approach, which is, we have some extra work to do here. But today, Facet is individually sequenced transactions by users. So if you want to transact in Facet, you send a special Ethereum transaction with special call data to the Facet inbox address, which is an EOA address, so not an upgradable contract, on the L1. It's 0x0000, all zeros, and then face 7, looks like Facet. At the end, if you do that, your transaction will be picked up, included in the block in the order in which it was appearing in the L1 block. And so there's no way to shut that off. Everyone can sequence transactions forever. There is no batching now, which is something we have to figure out and do, but like that's kind of the core idea behind sequencing. And I can keep talking about it.
Yeah. So it sounds like Facet is also a base rollup because sequencing is done by L1 validators, right? Like you as a user on like as a Facet user, I'm actually sending a transaction on the L1, right?
Yes. So the based rollup notion, like rollup itself, you end up in like, what is this thing? And everyone wants it to apply to them, so they twist it a little bit. Based rollup as a concept, I believe, can refer to two different and related things. One is decentralization, right? So like, can anyone do anything? And that's the case for us right now. It's just, the person who has power is the block proposer on the L1, and they can mess with you, but they can mess with anything. And so you're with respect to additional centralization vectors caused by rollup, you're at 0, right? So that's one idea behind the base thing. The other idea is that base stands in opposition to so-called run-ahead rollups, and this is a term I got from In It for the Tech, which is a cool collective. They're working on a cool rollup called Signet. Presswitch, I think he's a great guy. He didn't make fun of Facet, so if you're watching this, it's all good. I like you guys. Stuff, but he came up with this notion, and so you can have a rollup, and this is what their rollup does, which I think is cool. Signet and testnet that has permission sequencers, but it is synchronized with the L1, so you can change sequencers between blocks. You can do interesting things with force inclusion, where you don't have to have delays. You can do interesting L1 to L2 communications that are synchronous. And so you can have permissioned sequencing, but that's still synchronized with the L1. And I would still call that based, maybe totally based S versus centrally sequenced stuff, where the sequencer is running ahead of the L1 and you are interacting with its private world. And you could be subject to massive reorg risk and equivocation risk there. So Facet is a base rollup in both senses. But I think I'm not sure which sense is actually the most important.
I really like that. I haven't heard that term before, like run ahead sequencing, which is what most rollups do, like rollups that people are familiar with, right? It does a bunch of transactions, batches them together, posts that to the L1. But this also reminds me, I need to bother James Presswitch and try to get him on one of these streams as well, because I met him earlier this year and I was like, I gotta get him as a guest. So thank you. And that was actually, I was gonna bring up Signet later, or hope that you would bring them up when I was going to ask you, and I still will ask you later, but other rollups you think are doing interesting things. But we can stay on Facet for a second. So I actually had some, like, maybe these are kind of like more detailed questions than most people care about, but I'm curious about, like, the compute for everything happening on Facet, right? Like, I imagine you or Facet Foundation or someone is running Facet node. And anybody else could also run this node and propose transactions. That's how you're stage 2. But I'm curious about, like, the throughput. I know TPS isn't a great metric, but mega gas per second, like what kind of performance can you get on Facet? What kind of apps can you support? And, like, would bumping that number up just mean getting a bigger box to run this on?
Sure. Yeah. So so there is a Facet node. Facet's fundamentally a fork of the OP stack. Love the OP stack. We tried to change some important things, but change as little as possible. So if you want to go to docs.facet.org, you can pick a thing that says run a Facet node. You can get this Docker compose. Boom, you're up and running. And the node, is architecturally speaking, there is a consensus node, which is called Facet node. Which is a confusing name. And then there's an execution engine. And the consensus engine is basically responsible for figuring out what the relevant L1 history is, constructing a Facet block, a rollup block, and then sending that to the execution engine. And this is kind of annoying because the way modern ETH architecture works is you need these two nodes, because there's something called the engine API, which is how you actually do this. So it'd be simpler if they were one thing, because you don't actually have consensus here. But so anyway, that's how that works. And anyone can run that. And there's no, because there's no run ahead, there's no, state. These nodes are stateless with respect to, the only state is like the actual, final or pen, the state of the actual blockchain is the only state on Facet. There's no run ahead world that the sequencer has to, optimize. And, in terms of the gas limit right now is 200 million. I think we'll probably want to raise that soon. We're not exactly hitting that capacity, but yeah, I mean, it's, the standard promise of the rollup is that just make the box bigger, and you don't have to make it even that big, and it's still going to be fine for many people to operate. And just like on the L1, people use node providers, and Alchemy just went down, and that was a big problem for a lot of people, including our specific node, if not our rollup. And then you can, if you don't want to run the node, you can look at the proofs and have like your own light client in this smart contract that we have. So it's pretty similar to running. Anyone can run a base node, and no one probably does this, but you can run a base node and get the actual state. You just can't. You're going to be running very far behind unless you have a direct connection to the sequencer, which you don't need for us.
I see. But so because users are submitting transactions to this L1 EOA, it's not really an L1 contract, but does that limit like transaction times or finality times for Facet transactions? Like how do you look at that?
Sure. So, I'm not saying centralized sequence, just to be clear, is bad. You can have centralized sequencing and have good censorship resistance and unstoppability. By coincidence, none of them do it. So that's quite a coincidence, isn't it? Like this fine thing that everyone doesn't. Anyway, whatever. The big benefit of centralized sequencing is you get this pre-confirmation and you get exposed to equivocation by the sequencer, but they have a reputation to uphold. And anyway, it's going to be not, it's not like you're going to get a reorg of like a week or something. So the risk is manageable. So do it as long as forced inclusion exists. So that's the benefit. When it comes to something that is based in any sense, there's no run ahead. So you have to be on the L1 block time. And so Facet, it's not exactly synchronized because sometimes the L1 skips a slot and Facet creates a dummy block then because we're always once every 12 seconds. But basically you're synchronized there. And so you have all the same finality stuff as the L1. You got to get included, however many blocks, forget 15 minutes, something like that. Then it's, final, even after like, I think the biggest reorg in history is like 7 blocks. So like you're pretty good. But yes, you have that. You don't get a pre-confirmation. And, I think that can change, right? Like ideally the L1, pre-confirmations are a very hot topic and whatever. And, I tend to think in the first instance, you want the security, you don't want to add trusted intermediaries if you want to be careful about that. So, but you could add some trusted intermediary light setup and get pre-confs kind of like you would on a centrally sequenced rollup. But yes, the downside is you have to wait seconds. And, I guess the 6-second slot time thing got postponed, but I'm still counting on that. So please, if you're watching this, overlords, do that.
Yeah. All core devs, if you're listening, please let's bump up 6-second slots for Amsterdam or something.
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I know pre-comps are a very interesting topic, and I know like Tycho just implemented them recently, and I am inclined to agree with you that like adding extra actors with new trust assumptions is maybe, well, not saying it's necessarily a bad thing, but requires a lot of thought to implement properly. I do like the idea of having just the L1 proposers be responsible for that. Have it as a sidecar for existing validators. And I think Tycho is maybe doing something with that. I'm not totally sure. I know that there's some stuff coming in Fusaka that should enable base pre-comps, at least from what I know about like the Ethrex team and how they want to support base rollups. But yeah, definitely an interesting area to follow. So with Facet, so there are no bridges, right? You can only get the gas token by burning ETH to get FCT, right? By actually like doing transactions on Facet.
Yes, there are bridges, but there's no gas token bridge because good segue, right? Because the thing we were talking about a moment ago is like this question of who can post the relevant stuff, centrally sequence, forced inclusion, like sequencing, big issue. The other big issue is protocol level bridges, and in particular, a protocol level bridge for the gas token, right? This is probably maybe bigger, tied. The idea is simple. People want to use Ether for gas for some reason, right? Down the road, no one's going to even think about gas, but for now, people want to use the same thing. And rollup protocols want to get paid using a currency that is the same currency they pay to the L1 for data availability, so they can make the economics work. Okay, so now you bridge. I hate picking on whatever Arbitrum. You bridge, and then you go and you see on the L1, on the L2, you bridge. Oh, here's my balance. It's my ETH balance, right? My ETH balance on the L2, and so that's the end result of very reasonable requirements of like user experience and economics, like. Now we end up in a case where we have my ETH balance on the L2. But this is absurd, right? This is completely ridiculous, right? Like, it's not your ETH balance. Here, let's check. Okay. The balance on the L2 is something that 15 people can print as much as they want. Is that the case of ETH on the L1? Like, let's do no, it's not the case of ETH on the L1. If you have bridged Ether, that is a highly insecure token. And if you're going to build an entire economy on that, you are guaranteed to lose everything, in my opinion, after enough time. Maybe takes a really long time, but like, you cannot, it's like, imagine, people, Circle, right, is building ARC. They're using USDC as the gas token. People are like, that's got problems, rightfully so. What about every single rollup using bridged ETH as the gas token? So here is the very simple exploit. Suppose there are two people in the rollup, you and me, and we're the only two people. I'm the admin. I say, okay, cool. I'm going to print myself a bajillion bridged ETH. You don't get any. And now I'm just going to bid the gas price up to a bajillion because I have all this ETH. I can afford to burn it. You have none. And now you can't get a transaction in. You're priced out. Everyone's priced out but me. Your bridged ETH is worth, nothing here. And so, this is distinct from draining the L1 bridge, which is also bad. But when it comes to freezing the protocol, this is a huge vulnerability. And so, in my view, you simply cannot consider yourself secure if you have a bridged, gas token. It's just like, how can you do that? Now, I will say this, like, there is another view of the situation, and I will give a shout out to Tim Clancy and Sigil and everything they're doing. And, what makes the current situation particularly egregious, and I don't want to clump everyone in together, is that these upgrades I mentioned, printing unlimited gas, disabling forced inclusion, those upgrades are instant, right? So you can't defend against them. And it's disaster. But there's another school of thought to Facet, which I think is also, interesting and maybe better in some cases, which is saying, hey, there's all this kind of bad stuff, but with an exit window, that's a lot less bad. And I have criticisms of that, but I will at least say that you can, as a user, make a calculated decision to use a rollup with a bridged gas token as long as it has an exit window. If the rollup does not have an exit window, you just can't. It's like, would you use, it's like it's like way more permission than USDC. So that's the problem. So on Facet, and the alternative is also super problematic, but we're trying to do the good thing here. So on Facet, it is not bridged, meaning that there is no way to redeem the L2 gas token for anything on the L1, and there is no way for anything on the L1, a smart contract, a user, whatever, to issue the L2 gas token by fiat, so to speak. So the L2 gas token is called Facet Compute Token, FCT, and it is minted when you create a Facet transaction and burn ETH, burn L1 ETH. So every L1 transaction burns L1 ETH, the base fee times the gas units. And so when you do that, you are awarded FCT in proportion to how much you burned. And there's like a whole, you can go to fct.fyi and see this. There's a whole rate thing and whatever, complicated. But that's the idea. And you can also think of it as a one-way bridge in a sense, but one that has a total supply and everything. And so that's how you transact. You have to use a different kind of gas token, a custom gas token. This is something that the OP Stack kind of pioneered and they're bringing back. And so I think you're going to see more and more of these, but I think you cannot have a bridged gas token if you want a secure rollup, in my opinion. Unless the bridge is totally immutable, or there's caveats I could give here, but in the grand sense of the word, that's the issue. Are you frozen? Are we still live? Oh, am I live? Hello, everyone. I see that the stream is still live. So I will continue to give content. So So yeah, so you can go to fct.fyi and you can check out the dynamic. But basically, the idea, and we gave this a lot of thought, is to it's kind of like a Bitcoin difficulty adjustment mechanism where the rate of being able to mint FCT depends on what people have done and all this kind of stuff. And the goal here is to create a token that has a predictable max supply and or has a max supply and something that is fairly issued so that, you know, early people don't get everything. Other people can join, but there's still incentive for being early because there's halvings. And, you know, it's not like a pre-mined tokens. We really wanted to do something, you know, totally decentralized so that there'd be no reason, because if you have a big pre-mine and a whole shenanigans thing going on with this bridge token, then it's kind of like, what's the point of, or excuse me, this native token? It's like, well, the whole point of the native token was to escape this idea of a manipulable bridge token. So you need the native token to be, you know, not manipulable. So that's kind of how we set it up. So you can check that out, and it's one of the most important you know, components of Facet. Now, there are other bridges on Facet, right? We think bridges are great, you know, but we think bridges should operate on the app level. In other words, users should choose bridges, and it's not just bridges, right? It's any stable coin issue, any issue, any asset. You should choose an asset if you want to hold it, right? You should not choose an asset because the controllers of the Rollup put their thumb on the scale and said, okay, you got to use our asset, our bridged asset that 15 people control. And by the way, that 15 people number is, you know, that's the real number, right? You want to shut down any Rollup, 15 people, 18 people. He's back.
I'm back.
Okay, good. I was
All
dying up there. No, that's fine.
That's
But it's good to have you back. Are you frozen again? You're frozen again. It's fine. So bridges are super important, but you should be able to choose them. So like on the L1, Ethereum doesn't say USDC is better than USDT, so you should use that, or like this Pepe coin is worse than this other coin. How about now? So you should use that. The L1 lets you do whatever, and that's what a Rollup, in our opinion, should also do. So if you want to bridge an asset, you will find a bridge. You know, you find an application that you want to use. And maybe you will bridge some asset in, and someone else will bridge that same L1 asset in using a different bridge. And because there's no official bridge, right, you might have a confusing situation. You might have two L2 assets that are backed by the same L1 asset, and that is would be called a downside of this approach, right? Like just like on the L1, you can have a zillion assets. They could be called Ether. They could be called USDC. You can have a zillion confusing things. On the L2, you can also have that, and so you rely on a kind of, you know, social consensus process. But that's the upside of no one controlling it. Now, you know, bridges are free to use on Facet, just like in the L1, any technology they want to be secure or not secure or whatever they want to do, right? Like users have the ability to choose, and some users might choose, you know, to sacrifice some element of, you know, decentralization, like holding USDC would be an example of this. You're sacrificing something to get something good. There are bridge products that will allow you to bridge without going to the L1. You know, you can bridge from base to Facet or whatever. And then if you do that, well, now you've got like sequencer equivocation risk on base. You know, there's all kinds of compromise you have to make. And the idea is to let users and apps sort that out. Obviously, you want to help people do that, but the idea is not to pick the winners yourself. But we think it's really important for a protocol to both be provable, right? Like you need to be able to do proofs. And also you need to be able to do proofs without reinventing the wheel. And so, you know, we provide, when it comes to Facet provides a proof system. You know, you don't have to pay attention to it if you don't want to, but if you do want to, there's a smart contract on the L1, an immutable smart contract that implements this proof system game. And it allows you to post and read state roots using a hybrid ZK optimistic proof system. And you can build a bridge against that by looking at the state roots there and using them to decide whether users can withdraw. So that's available and very important to have, but it is not mandatory in terms of like what bridges people might want to build. And so that's kind of the pluralistic approach to bridging on Facet. supporting bridges in a great way and a proof system that is great, but not having a bridge that the protocol says that you are, required or strongly encouraged to use.
Got it. Okay. Tom, sorry again. I moved somewhere else closer to my router because for whatever reason, it is having trouble today. I had a question. So with FCT, so would it be possible to bridge FCT to like the L1?
Great question. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's generically, bridging L1 to L2 is easier because you can just, that communication is seamless, trustless. Bridging to the L1 from the L2, sending messages from the L2 to the L1 has to, you either have to use a proof system or some other method. But yes, absolutely, you could bridge it back, obviously into a wrapped ERC20. But you could escrow on the L2 and print something on the L1, and then reverse it, burn on the L1, and unescrow on the L2. So yeah, maybe we should do that. Someone should do that. Someone do that. Do it. You don't have to do it. And so, yes, I can see Boris. You get the Wi-Fi issue. That is, that's all good. So, one thing, and by the way, I was going to mention bridges, right? Like there is in Rollups, there is this notion of the canonical bridge. Okay, what does that mean? Another complicated debate. For me, that means a gas token bridge, because if you don't have a gas token bridge, what can you say is canonical? Like it's really arbitrary. So, we are on L2 beat with the canonical bridge. It was sort of arbitrarily selected. But the canonical bridge is the one that the Rollup says is official, that does the gas token thing, and that is managed by Rollup admins. And, what you see, and, people should use secure bridges, right? But what you see is that people don't like to use this thing, right? Like they don't like to send everything through the canonical bridge. Why? Because again, they prefer bridges that might be more convenient and make some sacrifices. They prefer holding stable coins. USDC is the biggest thing. And so if you are interested in doing this kind of thing, you are among the 70% of assets that aren't canonically bridged. Then it's like, if you're building towards that world, the canonical bridge, a gas token bridge, is even more risky, because you have the gas token bridge, right? And that way the bridge controls the economy of the Rollup by 15 people or whatever, but you're not even using it that much. So Base, I should check Base, Base, hey, Base has this thing, this vulnerability with respect to the gas token, but most of the assets are like stablecoins on there anyway, and so they aren't benefiting from the escrow side of the L1 bridge. They are benefiting from the proof system. Anyways, what's up, Boris? Welcome back. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted.
I decided to go outside and tether from my phone because my Wi-Fi is really having troubles today. But I'm glad that you were able to continue talking about all this, and I'm sure it was still rolling and still recording. But apologies for that. This has never been an issue like this. So, well, here we are. But yeah, Tom. So given all this, I mean, I feel like I keep asking you about this stuff for hours, but maybe I'll ask a couple more questions and then we can wrap things up. I mean, about Facet, like I'm curious, like what are these sort of applications that you're personally most excited about? Are you developing anything in-house with the team? Any sort of like, I don't know, example apps? Are there other people building on there so far? Like, are there things people can try out that we can tell our guests and listeners to just like go experiment with?
Sure. So yeah, I think, the killer feature for Facet, right, is this lack of intermediate, the protocol doesn't get in your way, right? So any app that wants to directly control, or along with the user directly control, like that user app relationship, is a great app for Facet. So if you think about, the highest level, obviously, stablecoins of all kinds of circles, as I mentioned, launching their own chain. But like you look at stablecoin, right? Like many things have been written about the risks of a stablecoin with respect to blacklisting users. Less is written about the risk of stablecoins with respect to protocols interfering. So, stablecoins should not hurt users, but protocol admins should not hurt stablecoins, and that is a problem. If Base shuts down, I hate to pick on Base. I do like them, by the way. They're just the biggest OP set, whatever. If Base shuts down, what does Circle do exactly, right? Like they have, certainly they can reissue USDC to any individual person, any individual EOA who holds it, but there's a whole universe of DeFi and contracts and everything, and like teasing out who owns what from that is impossible, literally impossible, because there's a Turing complete situation. So Circle would be in a lot of trouble, if they were on a chain that shut down. On Facet, though, you're protected from that, and so you can not worry about that trouble. Now, I think someone like Circle can start their own L1, and that's kind of the question when it comes to Facet in the world is, okay, I don't want someone else to be the king or the monarch. I now have two choices. I can either have myself as the king or no king, right? And or no monarch. And, the choice of having yourself instead of someone else is very tempting. And that's what Circle is doing with ARC. But our sort of thesis is that's like not a good call, basically, because guess what? Other people aren't going to want you to be the king, right? No one wants it. So the best strategy, the L1 strategy, no monarch, no ruler, everyone on the playing field, and all kinds of inconvenience maybe could come from that. It's nice to have a monarch because they just get everyone in line. But that's the idea. So I think stablecoins and other assets that, are apps that are controlled by people who don't want interlopers. I think NFTs, we have a very cool app that my co-founder, Michael, has worked on a lot called Beamer, which is a way of minting NFTs on Twitter. And if you mint an NFT, hey, this thing will last forever. No one can take away that. One of the coolest NFTs on Facet is PIVs A to B, which you can see on FacetNFT.com. FacetSwap.com is a DEX we operate with tokens. If you want to, buy or sell FCT or something, you can do it on there, as well as other tokens. And that's like the big picture. Like, I think, here is a person who wouldn't be interested in Facet, right? So I'll be, where we're down, here's where we are not good, right? If you are someone who wants to bridge into a Rollup, do stuff, and then bridge back out quickly, then you do not need the benefits of Facet because your exposure is very limited. And this is kind of how Vitalik himself sees the Rollup landscape, which I think is super misguided. And in fact, Vitalik tweeted a tweet which might go down in history as like the most incomprehensible tweet ever, basically, where he basically said, more important than stage 2 is doing sub-hour withdrawal times from Rollup canonical bridges. And I
saw your commentary on that.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, there's, I'm down for differing viewpoints, right? And maybe I'm wrong about a lot of things, but there is something called logic, and you have to draw the line somewhere. And when you say sub-hour withdrawal times without an exit window, without stage 2, it is not possible because the Rollup can shut down in 1 second. And guess what? If the Rollup shut down, let me check. Can you, check the papers? Can you withdraw? No. So the thing Vitalik is advocating for is not logic. It doesn't, it doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm certainly open to other, viewpoints on this. And his overall viewpoint, I think, is like basically issue assets on the L1, bridge them in, and then bridge them out. And if you're trying to do that, then you don't need Facet as much. The problem with Vitalik's viewpoint here is that this is not what users want to do. It's like you can say everything you want about this. People want to go to Rollups and use them like general purpose chains and issue assets and do all this fun stuff. And that is not compatible with that worldview. So we think we're kind of aligned with how users actually view this thing. And I think the litmus test is who is creating assets on an L2. If you are creating assets on an L2, if you're creating state on an L2, then you need to be on something unstoppable. If you are not creating state on an L2, you still might, but you have maybe less of a, it's less crucial, but still important.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. You're like very maximally decentralized here and and unstoppable. Which actually, that's the other thing that I realized I didn't get to directly ask about, which is the whole unstoppable rollups initiative. which I've learned a lot from, and I've really enjoyed the whole stream series, which is why I knew that you would be an amazing guest to talk about all of this. What can you tell people about that before we wrap up?
Sure. So Unstoppable Rollups is an initiative that Michael and I, Facet co-founders, launched in collaboration with under a grant from the Ethereum Foundation to basically spread this idea. We are not we're very passionate about Facet. We think Facet is best, great. Facet, come to Facet. But ultimately, the biggest challenge I think right now is just spreading the word about this idea being important, not saying Facet is so great, right? Like, we need people to understand, even if you're not using Facet, if you hate Facet, that this idea is actually really important, and you should be thinking about it and maybe working on your competitor to Facet or whatever you want to do. But think about this thing, because when it comes to rollups, this is like, for me, number one. So we wanted to launch this and use Facet as kind of the incubator, reference, implementation, whatever you want to call it, to like try out these ideas and then produce research surrounding it on how you might do things. And the kind of culminating thing, which we're not done, we have another seminar. We have another community call coming up about sequencing, but the kind of so far, pinnacle has been just like, how do you do a stage 2 roll up, how do you do an unstoppable stage 2 roll up? And here's the breakdown. But anyway, go to unstoppablерollups.com. There's links to community calls. I've tried to summarize them using AI, and there's videos. You can watch that. You can read the white paper. And, at the very least, I think it should animate you about the problems and, what's stuff that needs to be solved, even if you think that the Facet solution or any other solution is not right. This is, important for everyone. So yeah, check out unstoppablerollups.com.
Yes, definitely do. I mean, I really appreciate the work you're doing to educate people and keep this conversation going, because I mean, not that I have a significant amount of funds, on chain, but I still trust like my sort of like whatever on-chain savings, where I'm collecting some yields, some like cash I'm holding for taxes. I keep that on the L1 just because I'm like, let's keep this as safe as possible, pay a little more in gas. Let's not take risks, right? Like, I still don't feel like there's like a rollup that meets those needs quite to the same extent. And I think we will get there. And, folks like you are really helping us to get there. So definitely, people listening, check out unstoppablерollups.com. I'm going to drop that and the links into the show notes. I've learned a lot from those, and I think you will too. And yeah, Tom, thank you again for sharing all of this and for taking the time to explain Facet and Unstoppable Rollups to us today. Do you have any like closing, I don't know, calls to actions, things related to Facet, things you want people to check out? Obviously, follow Facet, follow Tom. We're gonna add all those links too, but
yeah, I mean, we are looking for, it doesn't have to be Facet, by the way, like anything in this world. If you want to be part of this, go to the Unstoppable Roll. If you want to be part of Facet, we have the Discord, discord.gg/Facet or /Facet. Go to the Unstoppable Rollups Telegram, get involved there. Again, I'm going to be announcing a new call soon that you should join. Like, really want people to get involved. Everything we do is open source, MIT licensed. Okay, like I like the MIT license. People like the other stuff, but all good. Anyway, you can use it for free. You can contribute to it if you want to, solve your own problems and solve others. So yeah, and I think like if I were to take it all the way back to Google, I think, and if I were to even other cloud computing software, Google Cloud, Amazon AWS, like, I think you can look at this as, it's not really about the blockchain, right? I would say it's about like, basically like thin platforms versus, I'd call it thin platforms versus thick platforms. Thin protocol, it's like a thin platform gets out of the way, right? And doesn't help you and doesn't hurt you, right? So this is like Ethereum. A thick platform gets in your way and maybe helps you a lot and maybe hurts you. And if you look at the world out there, the Web 2, it's all thick platforms. Like, try using Google Cloud. That's a thick platform, right? That will give you a ton of stuff, right? If you're trying to deploy that, there's documentation. You can even call them. You can do all this kind of stuff. It's like, great, we use it. I like Google Cloud. Unfortunately, it's like whatever. So there's thick protocol everywhere. And so, unless something bad happens to you, you will get very lulled into this thing of like, this is great, the luxury of a thick protocol. But trust me, if something does, you will think, okay, well, there's this dark side. And so I think I would just think about thin platforms, like things that might be more inconvenient in some ways, but stay out of your way. And I think Ethereum is the best thing ever, when it comes to this. And I think we should all try to spread it, because the default is, hey, thick platform, come, nanny platform, help me, live my life, and just please, I'll put out of my mind the possibility that you could harm me. So that would be my closing thought. Thank you all for listening.
That was beautiful and very well said. Yes, thank you everyone who's tuned in. This is going to be on YouTube. Let me know if you have future guests in mind. And yeah, once again, thank you and have a great day.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.